we are going to even continue engaging as we go along. So allow us, someone is feeling like data, and someone is ready to learn. Thank you. So allow us to end it at that, and I know we are going to keep engaging. So thank you for your feedback, guys. Really appreciate. Just a minute, I share my screen. Yeah. Just a minute. Thank you. So I would want one of my co-hosts to confirm if you can see my screen kindly.
Yes, Ian, we can.
Thank you. So guys, let's start this webinar. I will start this webinar by probably telling us or introducing to us how the webinar is going to be today. So our webinar is we're going to have a little bit of introduction, what it is and what it entails. Then after that, we're going to go into a panel discussion. We have two panelists who will be talking to us about the whole agenda. And then during the panel discussion, we're going to have number one, we have questions that I have prepared for our panelists. And then when around 4 questions, we get the answers from them. And then after that, we're going to give a chance to you guys to ask questions. So note that as we go along, if you find a questions you want to ask, just go to chat down there. You put your question on chat. And then from that, our team, I have quite a big team behind all the success of all these. They're going to write the question down. And as we go along, you'll see how to answer it. But note that we're going to have 4 to 5 questions that are going to be asked verbally. So you don't want to give a chance to 5 of you. So if you have a question that you want to ask verbally, when that time comes, just we're going to request you to raise your hand, and then we're going to unmute you. You introduce yourself, you tell us where you're joining us from, which organization you are from, and then you ask your question, just like a minute. And then I'm going to direct the questions to our panelists. And then after that, we're going to have closing remarks from our panelists. And then we're going to have an outro of the webinar. So our webinar, we are targeting it to be around 1 hour, 30 minutes. So stay with us till the end so that you can gain all the knowledge that you might gain today. Then to a few house rules is we have muted all your mics, as you can note. Behind the scenes, one of the controllers, UV, is going to be unmuting when someone needs to ask a question or they may need to do a contribution. So welcome, guys. Allow me to even start this webinar closer to you. So I don't know whether you know or you have a privacy screen protector on your phone. I would want to know how many probably even know whether this privacy screen protector exists. So why does it really exist? Yeah. This privacy screen protector, when you're commuting on public transport, you're probably seated next to your partner. Someone might not be able to see exactly what is going on your phone, because our phones have become our lives are centered around our phones. Yeah. So someone developed a privacy screen protector with the mind behind it, that they're concerned about your privacy. This conversation comes down to your privacy. You are the data subject. Like, would you want someone to see when you're keying in a password into your bank account app? Would you want someone to see when you're texting someone else? That is your data. That is private. So that is why probably have such a privacy screen protector. So I would want to know at the end probably how many have them. And some of us usually say this privacy screen protector for those guys who just want to hide things. But does your privacy actually concern you? It's a great question, and we'll be trying to answer that question as we go along. So why this conversation? Yeah, why this conversation? I think number one, we've had scenarios in the world. All of us know TikTok. TikTok is actually just about to be banned on all government devices. It was one of the congressmen came back in the US saying that they want to ban TikTok on all government devices. Yeah, and TikTok has even been banned in other countries, all because of data privacy, because of how they handle their data privacy. So it's a conversation that is actually going on in the global space. Yeah, it's actually a big conversation. Who else can we look up to? Even let's bring it down here to our country. Yeah, let's bring it down here to our country. We've had even Oppo. Oppo itself was banned. Oppo was fined. Sorry, Oppo was fined by the ODPC. This is the Office of the Data Protection Commission here in Kenya. It was fined 5 million. Why? Because there was a complaint about someone. They used their photo. Yeah, and the commissioner said that these people would be fined 5 million for not complying to those data, that particular data privacy or the guidelines according to the act. Talk about even Facebook, Meta, the mother country, the mother company to Facebook, WhatsApp, and all the rest. Yeah, it was fined around 405 million. Yeah, why? Because the investigation focused on teenagers between the ages of 13 to 17, and it was saying these teenagers are allowed to create business accounts on Instagram. And when you create a business account on Instagram, your data goes live to everyone. Anyone can be able to see your phone number, anyone can be able to see your name and all that data. So Facebook was fined because it allowed a teenager who was between 13 and 17 to create a business account. That account displayed that teenager's information, and that was against the set rules and regulations according to the act in Ireland. So it's quite a conversation. We go deeply into that. We have Microsoft fined around 60 million. I know the companies you're working for. What would be the effect if your company was actually fined 5 million or $60 million? Yeah, would that be an effect that would actually make you close down your company or close down your organization? As a data protection officer, where do you stand? Are you actually thinking about complying to these laws? Are you started thinking about even registering with the organization, with the government body that handles data in your country? So it's quite a conversation. We've seen a number of them being fined. So on which basis are these guys being fined? So we have the legal and regulatory requirements. According to, like in Kenya, according to section 41 and 42 of the Data Protection Act 2019, every data controller or data processor shall implement appropriate technical and organizational measures which are designed to, number one, to implement the data protection principles in an effective manner. There are principles that are existing. So it's actually a requirement that any person who is handling data, you're supposed to implement the data protection principles in an effective manner and to integrate the necessary safeguards for the purpose of into the processing of that particular data. Yeah, and to give effect to this section, the data controller or data processor shall consider measures such as, number one, to identify reasonable, foreseeable internal and external risks that are posing to personal, probably personal data in person's possession or control. Number two, to establish and maintain appropriate safeguards against the identified risks. Yeah, it goes on and on. To even to verify that the safeguards are effectively implemented. This is what we're talking about, privacy by design. Yeah, like, are the safeguards actually effectively implemented, or just you have safeguards that are put in place but they're not being implemented? And also the last one, to ensure that the safeguards are continually updated in response to new risks or deficiencies. You just don't do an implementation of, say, ISO 27701. You need to continually update that. If you're registered with the ODPC, have you had a data, an audit to show that you are updated or you're in response the current, because things keep changing, the risks and the deficiencies keep changing. Are you updated? Yeah. Then the Article 25 and Recital 78 of the GDPR, this is in Kenya. I know it totally might be different, but almost similar to people coming from different countries. That it is taking into account the state of the art, the cost of implementation of, and the nature, scope, and context and purposes of processing, as well as the risks to rights and freedoms of natural persons posed by the processing. The controller shall, you as the controller, you are the one who is getting this data. They shall, both at the time of determination of the means and processing it, and at the time of processing itself, implement appropriate technical and organizational measures. So you are actually required to follow through with the act. You're actually required to comply with the act. So guys, it's quite an important conversation. It's quite an important conversation. We are lucky in Kenya. We have an established ODPC that is following up. and even recently had an ODPC event at KICC, and the conversation keeps going on, or because it's actually an important conversation. We've had cases of where people, their data has been breached. How do you follow up? So that is what we're going to be talking about today, looking at it from an angle of what is actually privacy implementation by design. What can you be able to do for you to let it be in design and in default when you're putting up your systems? How can they be able to comply with actually the data privacy and protection laws? So guys, I will not be the one who will be taking you through this important conversation. I have two panelists with us today, and allow me to introduce them because they are more experts than me on this particular topic. Allow me to introduce to you our first panelist. Yeah, our first panelist is none other than Cindy Koyer, Wakili herself. And Cindy is an advocate of the High Court by profession. And currently also, she's a project manager for both data protection and ISMS, that is information security, at Sentinel Africa. Yeah. Apart from her smile, she's also an expert in data protection. And this has seen her train a variety, more than 300 persons in this field of in the requirements provided for under the data protection legislative framework. She's trained and she's taken this conversation to different countries. Currently, she's in Rwanda on a similar assignment to take this conversation about data privacy. And basically, she also has an honors from Nairobi University School of Law and a postgraduate diploma from Kenya School of Law. So quite an expert in this field. So we are glad to have you, Cindy, as also a PCB certified trainer and an ISO 27701 BIMS lead implementer. So Cindy, when the time comes, we'll be glad and we are lucky and we are grateful because you gave us a few minutes of your time for us to be able to tap from your knowledge. So thank you. And we are looking forward to hearing from you. I hope you guys are looking forward to listening in to Cindy. Then our second panelist is none other than Musa himself. His name is Musa Wesitsa. And Musa is a co-founder at Sentinel Africa and also the CEO Sentinel Africa. And he's a professional risk practitioner, very passionate about information security. And he with a very good focus on implementation, both maintenance and auditing of security management, information security management systems based on the ISO standards, the globally recognized ISO standards. Yeah, Musa has a team of more than 30, I myself included, at Sentinel Africa. And here, apart from being CEO, he champions the training and implementation of these ISMS systems and even other things like business continuity management systems. And to even sum it up, Musa is among the very first people worldwide to achieve ISO 27001 master on ISMS. Yeah, and Musa also has a certified data privacy solutions engineer certificate from ISACA. More to that, he's also ISO 27701 senior lead implementer, and the list goes on and on. So guys, we are really glad to have these guys here with us today. And I hope the conversation we take it through, you guys by the end of it all, you're going to have learned as much as you can. So allow me to even request Cindy and Musa to just share their videos. Welcome, Cindy. Welcome, Musa.
Thank you.
How are you, Cindy? How are you doing?
I'm doing well, thank you, Ian.
Good to have you. Thank you. I hope Rwanda is treating you well. Welcome to the conversation.
Thank you.
Musa, how are you, Musa?
Fine, good afternoon. I'm very fine.
Good to see you. Good to see you, Musa. So guys, allow me to probably just start with a simple question. Start with Cindy. Cindy, why is this conversation actually so important important to you? Why are you so passionate? Because I've seen the passion that oozes from you when you're talking about data privacy. Why is this conversation is so important to you?
So thank you so much for that question, Ian. Data protection is quite close to my heart. It's even the webinar that we are hosting today is quite timely because we are, I think the Data Protection Act has been in force from 2019. So the understanding is that majority of us are underway, either attained compliance or we are towards the tail end of also attaining compliance. So it's very, very important to us if we're in this journey of implementing data protection that we understand at the root of it. How are we ensuring that our technical abilities are reflecting what is required from our privacy environment? How are we making sure that we are embedding privacy by design so that even as we are undertaking our services, as we're providing services to our customer, even for us as customers, we want to understand what exactly should I be looking out for to make sure that the privacy that is being displayed is being applied as default and not as an afterthought. So that is why this conversation is very important and quite timely for us.
Thank you, Cindy. That sounds really good. Thank you for that. We will be diving more into it. Musa, I hope you're well. Say hi to our attendees and probably tell us also why this conversation has had you currently in Uganda. You're also going down to Mombasa at the end of this month for ISACA conference, just on the same topic or around the same conversation. Why this conversation is important to you?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. I have to agree with Cindy that it is quite timely. And for me, it's not just about the push from the regulator. And this is something we're seeing that's cutting across the region. So we have the same conversation going on in Uganda here, same conversation going on in Rwanda, same conversation going on in Kenya. We also have the same conversation going on in Tanzania because we know that the act was in Parliament and it was passed. So we see that this is something that is an ongoing conversation in the region and even outside the region. But really, what it is that drives me towards this is the removing the complexity. Yeah, because when we think about regulation, sometimes it can be seen as it's just a purview of lawyers, and if we come in as what you call the normal practitioners, then it looks like it's just such a complicated thing. But what I like to do is just to show that this is something that actually is within anyone's grasp. If we spend more time simplifying the complex, then we get more alignment, then we get more people onto it, then we actually will be able to achieve that which we're trying to achieve, which is actually to ensure that we're protecting the privacy of data subjects information, which we hold, we process, we control, we collect, we dispose of. So it's actually that thing about the simpler it is, the more people will get on board. The more people get on board, the more this thing actually work for us. So that's really what drives me. Yeah.
Thank you, Musa. Thank you so much. Yeah, quite a point there that the removing the complexities in it. Yeah, that is really important because it narrows it down, just the way you said that the more simpler it is, guys, the more people will be involved in it, and the more we achieve the objective of actually championing data privacy and protection. So thank you so much, Musa, for that. And without further ado, guys, allow us to probably dive into the very first question. And Cindy, I will throw this to you. The very first question will be, what does privacy by design? Because we are talking about this privacy by design. Is it just a topic? What does it actually entail? So take it away, Cindy.
Okay. Thank you, Migwi. So basically this, as Migwi had elaborated quite earlier, it's a requirement under the law, both national law, also at an international level within the GDPR. So let me start off by just explaining with the context within which this would operate. So the Act also provides for roles within the data protection sphere. So this is a role of a data controller or a data processor. This has been applied across regions, even when it comes to legislation, because the same roles have been identified in Rwanda, in Uganda as well. Uganda goes the extra step to define an additional role as data collector, but we'll get into that a bit as we go along. So a data controller is an entity or an individual that basically processes data, and they govern everything that is done pertaining to that data throughout its life cycle. They determine the how, so this is how the data will actually be processed. This is can also be referred to as the means, and the why. So the why is the purpose for which the data is actually being processed. So the controller determines how data will be processed, why it's being processed, and they govern everything that is done pertaining to this particular data throughout the life cycle of the data. This is from collection up until disposal. So the difference between now a controller and a processor is a data processor only processes data on behalf of the controller. So they cannot do this on their own volition. It's pertaining to instructions. So for processors, you find these are more so our service providers. They only are given access to the data that they are processing by virtue of having a form of engagement, and it has a very specific output. So if I could give an example, for example, we would have this type of relationship between a bank and a credit reference bureau, where they only follow up with this credit reference bureau to verify the standing of the customer. Also, if an employer decides to engage a third party to undertake background checks on their behalf, that background check third party only has the ability to process that data for a very specific output, which would be to verify that the employee they are hoping to onboard is who they actually say they are. So why do I go into these two definitions? It's because even privacy by design would be influenced on the role you play in this particular sphere. So for example, a controller now, because liabilities falls more on them because they are the ones who are engaging directly with the customer. They are the ones who are expected to demonstrate this. So in the instance that you're required to actually embed privacy by design, there are specific controls that you would have to have in place. This is also from a standard perspective. Even when we look at ISO 27701, which is the privacy standard, there are very specific controls expected from a technical perspective and organizational perspective when it comes to controllers. Also for processors, the ambit is quite different because they only are able to do this based on the instructions that they have received. And also, if you are a processor, for example, if you provide software as a service, then you're working as a service provider for a controller. But now it is for you to make sure that you're putting these designs in place to enable functionality, because one of the control requirements for a processor is to make sure that they are enabling the controller to be compliant. Yes. So by virtue of having to do this, the processor has to enable these features if they're providing such a facility to make sure that the controller is able to comply. So that's just the basis for now, the baseline for understanding where we're going to when it comes to privacy by design. It's worth noting that currently we have an ISO standard. This is ISO 31700, which it actually came into force in 2023 this year, and it's the requirements around privacy by design for consumer goods and services that are provided. So it's also worth noting that this particular standard is also tied to specific SDG goals, just to show how important privacy by design is. It's literally a force steering us towards the sustainable development goals that are expected from us at a global level. So the specific SDG goals it addresses is, for example, decent work and economic growth, which is SDG 8. It also is tied to SDG 9, which speaks on industry, innovation, and infrastructure. And lastly, it also touches on SDG 16, which is on peace, justice, and strong institutions, because in your compliance, in your efforts to comply, you're basically building up on the backbone of the institution itself. So now let's go into the definition of what privacy by design is. So basically, privacy by design is ensuring that in your designing of your systems, your processes, it is not only tied to systems, it is also processes and procedures. So in coming up with these processes, systems, and procedures, you're ensuring at the core privacy is observed. So throughout the development life cycle, you're making sure that we are embedding privacy at each stage, from initial and up until conclusion. So basically, the goal here is in embedding this privacy by design, we are understanding what the risks are in what we are seeking to undertake, and we are putting in place controls through in the design to make sure that these risks do not materialize. So then we also have privacy by default, which goes hand in hand with privacy by design. But it is pegged on us making sure we are implementing privacy by design. So privacy by default is basically making sure that from the onset, privacy is considered automatically. And this is more proactive. So it means that the data subject, which is now us as individuals who personal data applies to, do not have to do any extra steps to ensure our privacy. It means the extra steps have already been undertaken by the controller or the processor to make sure that by default, my privacy is already being protected. And this ties in hand with a principle called data minimization, where there's a requirement to only process the data and limit it to what is absolutely necessary, and then also retention. So we are also making sure we are only retaining what is, anything that only we have a purpose attached to it. We're not retaining data for longer than is also necessary. So some principles also emanate from this privacy by design and default. So when we are looking to implement this, we have to also be cognizant of what do the principles say when it comes to privacy by design and default. So one of the principles is proactivity and not reactivity. We are to be proactive. We are to be preventive and not corrective. So here we are basically making sure that we are going, we have foresight. We're operating from a foresight perspective. So we're not waiting for something to happen and then now we are coming back and saying, okay, this already happened. Now we should embed this to fix this. We should be more future looking when it comes to the design that we are having in mind. And then also, because they go hand in hand, privacy has to be the default setting. It has to uphold what the protection of that data subject. Here we are basically having the data subject at our core. We are putting their interests first. So we're making sure it's by default that we are making sure that we don't breach any privacy requirements that we have in place. And then also, there's a principle on embedding privacy in the design. So this is the adding on. You're making sure it complements. It already exists within the system, yeah? We are integrating it. We are adding constructive elements that basically build into the cybersecurity architecture if it's pertaining to any specific system. Then an additional principle would be making sure we do not compromise on it's uncompromised functionality. So we are not focusing on it as long as it functions. No, we are looking at basically how are we respecting privacy first versus how is it functioning? The focus is more on privacy. So here we even though if it's going to be something that we would have to sacrifice, even if it's an added bonus for us, basically we consider privacy regardless. Yeah, even in the functionality that we are looking towards. So this is where we are ensuring transparency, we are ensuring integrity. So even within our design, we are not collecting hidden data in the background. Yeah, we are fully transparent that this is what we are collecting, this is what you are agreeing to, this is what you're consenting to, this is the purpose. We are being fully transparent. Even if the customer, because of the extent to which we are collecting the data, they might shy away, we should not say that we are going to hide this just because of function. Yeah, so that is what that principle speaks to. Then we also have a principle on end-to-end life cycle, which requires us to have actually privacy by design throughout the life cycle of the data. So this is at collecting, whether we are storing, whether we are disposing, throughout the life cycle, we are incorporating privacy by design. And then we also have the requirement for maximal transparency and visibility, which is also tied to uncompromised functionality, as we've explained. We are fully transparent, the data subject is fully aware. This goes hand in hand with the right of the data subject to be informed. So that's why we are also observing that right by ensuring maximum transparency. Then we also have a principle around user-centered privacy by design. So everything that we are doing is just making sure that we are spotlighting the data subject. They are our key focus, they are our key concern, and everything that we are doing is for their benefit. So those are some of the elements that go into privacy by design. And also we've highlighted also how privacy by default comes into play when it comes to design. And that's basically what it entails. Maybe, yeah.
Wow, Cindy, that's deep, yeah. I hope you guys are ready with you're writing your notes. Yeah, because myself, I am, that it's all about the systems, the process. It has to go into the system the processes and the procedures. We just don't do on systems and you forget on procedures, yeah? And some of those principles, yeah, that it's proactive and don't be reactive to it. Don't correct when some of your data is been taken wrongly. You need to have get that before it's actually done. So thank you, Cindy. I hope you guys have got that. And allow me to skip into the next question. And this one, I will throw it to Mr. Musa. Mr. Musa, how can organizations actually demonstrate privacy by design? We've seen what privacy by design is, yeah, and what it entails. But now, because most of our attendants are guys in this field, they're data protection officers, they are probably compliant, they're in IT. How can our organizations actually demonstrate this privacy by design? Over to you, Musa.
Thanks, Migui. I think taking over from what Cynthia said, Cynthia, you raise a good point when you talk about the fact that when we think about privacy by design, it should actually be the default. So we are not compromising on privacy, in favor of functionality or in favor of usability. And here, when you're talking about the technologies, or rather the applications, for example, a software that you'll be using, like a web portal or something like that, then we know that, we always know that security pulls in one direction and usability pulls in the other. So now, if we were to tag on the issue of privacy, then we'll know that, of course, then, therefore, privacy pulls in one direction, usability pulls in another, and functionality pulls in yet another direction. So it actually is very difficult for organizations or for businesses to actually want to make systems less user-friendly, because that's actually what we're trying to do. However, in terms of the overall benefit is that we want to make sure that data subjects are aware. I like how you said it. You said it's about transparency, because the privacy is not about secrecy. It's about transparency. We want to make sure that data subjects are fully aware about their data, what we're doing with it, how much of it we are collecting, how long we store it, right? And if we dispose it, and how do we dispose of it? If we share it with third parties, who are those third parties? And then do we actually extend obligation to those third parties? So it's more about transparency. And the data subject then should be able to see the benefit of that, so that you're compromising on usability, but at the same time, there's a good reason for that. I'll give you an example. When you look at the OS, the Mac OS, if you're using an iPhone, right, or using an iPad, and anytime an app wants to read from another app, the first thing it will do is it will pop up a message and tell you, do you actually allow that app to actually track your activities in another app? So the first thing it does is that it stops that activity. Now, previously, what we were looking at, what we were seeing was that you wouldn't even know about it, because what the designer of that particular process is thinking is that this is in your best interest to make it as seamless as possible. So when you think about usability, then that is the advantage, or rather that's the thing that you're losing out on by introducing this extra step. So you're making life a bit more difficult for the data subject in terms of the usability, but in terms of the transparency, you have all of a sudden just opened them to the fact that this app actually reads my information, or rather tracks my activities, right, when I am actually in another app, things that you would not have known prior to that. So those are some of the concerns that come in, and people in the boardrooms, people who make decisions, have to start to think about what is the overall good for the data subject, and then why should we put emphasis in actually doing this thing, which actually looks like making everybody's life a bit harder. Now, bringing back to the question you asked, maybe, and in the interest of making this conversation a bit more easy to understand, like I say, so we don't need to think about privacy by design and only go straight into technology, go straight into apps, go straight into products. Let's just think about simple processes. So simple processes that you have in the organization, do they also need to have privacy by design, right? Do they also have to have privacy by default, or is this something that is just relevant for technology only? So let's think about a scenario. Let's say you have a job vacancy, right? So you advertise for that vacant position, and then people send in applications, right? So if I was applying for a job, right, I would send in a CV, and then the CV would have some information on it, right? And being that I want the job, I'll probably put in so much information there so that I can get a leg up over everybody else who forgot to put in the information there. And all of us have been there, so we've been doing this, right? So then that's a process. And what your process is doing, if you don't design it any differently, it is going to have you get so much information, more information that is necessary. Because what are you trying to do? You're trying to shortlist. What are you trying to shortlist? Based on what? Maybe you're trying to shortlist based on the fact that people have a degree. Maybe they have a degree in linguistics. Let's say you're doing something in linguistics. I don't know. So now that's all you need. All you need is to shortlist based on the fact that somebody has a degree in linguistics. So you don't need to know how old they are, right? You don't need to know where they're coming from. You don't need to know, do you even need to know their gender, right? So the thing is, your process itself, even think about the processes we have that are not technology-based processes. They also can actually be designed with privacy by design in mind, privacy by default. And that goes down to the privacy principles. So when we're thinking about design, or rather when we think about coming up with a framework, we always fall back on a principle. So some of the principles that Cindy has mentioned, for example, talk about data minimization as a principle, right? So if we talk about data minimization, basically says that collect just enough data for you to make the decision you want to make, right? So in that particular example of somebody who's sending you the CV, or rather somebody who's applying for a job, right? For you to make a decision, collect only that information that is enough for you to be able to make that to make that decision that you want to make. So the trick here is not to think that, oh, unless I have systems, unless I have technologies, then this thing doesn't work for me. Or in this case, I have existing technologies that I've had in the organization the last 10 years. So what am I going to do? How am I going to change that? So that's not the issue. The issue is that go to the process. Think about the things that you do. Think about it from a point of what am I trying to achieve? So if I'm trying to recruit somebody, then what is the minimum information that I need to collect from a data subject here for me to be able to make a decision? Maybe something you could do is this, in just that example, what you could do is you could say that I'm going to have 3 steps. The step number 1 is the long list. In the long list, I want people who only have a degree. Okay, so that's the only question you ask, no other question. So if they have, they're in to the next step. If they don't have, they're out. And that is all the information you collect. So out of 1,000 people, for example, you now have sieved it down to say 200, right? So now you have 200. So the 800, you did not collect any other information apart from that information you needed. So therefore now you have 800. Now, sorry, you have 200. Now with the 200, now you need more information. So probably now with the 200, you want to know their educational background. No, sorry, we've covered that. Then you want to know their professional background. So you want to know how many years they've worked, which organizations they work with, etc., etc. Because now you want to make a decision for the shortlist, right? Because now you want to do maybe a face-to-face interview or something like that. Guys, all of us have been through this process, right? So now in that particular step, then now you ask for information. Now you use only this information to make a decision to go to the next step, like that. So what you're doing is that you're increasing the information you want, yeah, at every step of the way, okay, in your process. Now, if you design your process like that, then you're designing it with privacy in mind, okay? And that's all that this is. Now, in terms of the question, how can organizations demonstrate this? So if you're looking at being able to demonstrate this as an organization, then it boils down to what activities are you going to do, right? That then this can show up. So for example, the processes that we have, this can actually be documented in a process flow. Now, process flow can show very easily at which steps of the way in the process are we going to be collecting data, at which steps of the way are we going to be collecting actually PII, right? So you have to be that granular. And then you can actually say that at this level of PII is what is happening to that PII. What's the kind of processing that's happening? Are we collecting? Are we sharing it with a third party, for example? Are we storing it? If you're storing it, you're storing it for how long? Then if you're disposing of it, how are we doing the disposal and those kind of things? So that can then come up together in a very nice framework, a documented framework that then can show that this is what we're doing. The other thing you can do is when you do a privacy impact assessment, especially when we look at those processes that have a lot of sensitive information. So of course there's PII, but there's also sensitive PII. Now different jurisdictions will have different definitions of sensitive PII, but we tend to have a very generic understanding of what sensitive PII is, right? So when you have a process that is going to either process or collect or interact in any way with sensitive PII, then you definitely want to do a DPIA for that, right? Yeah, data protection impact assessment. So as you're doing a data protection impact assessment, then some of these things will come out also. So the level of privacy by design that has gone into this process will come out. So you can get your gaps, and then you can actually say that these are the things that I need to fix so that I'm able to actually meet this requirement, right? So those just, in a nutshell, those are some of the things that you can do when you're looking at how to actually not just demonstrate, but actually implement privacy by design in the organization. Yeah. Back to you.
Wow, thank you, Musa. I hope you guys, attendees, I hope you are picking it up, yeah? Because these are some of the things like Musa has narrowed it down so well, yeah? I thought most of us probably just thought this thing goes in when there are systems involved, yeah? And he's saying you just don't need to demonstrate that you're actually having this privacy by design, but you need to implement it, yeah? So how do you do that? Or how do you demonstrate? And he's narrowed it down very well, like at which point do you collect what data? Do you really need, like when you're applying for jobs, some of us even say everything, even the languages you speak, everything, yeah? But do you really need to know that I come from Muranga? Yeah, you don't need to know that, yeah? So it is important to narrow it down that way. Wherever you are, whichever organization you are in, there are processes that are there, there are systems that are there. There are even actually, how do you now demonstrate? And not only demonstrate, how do you even implement that? Because demonstrating is on one side, implementing is actually on another side. So I think it's quite important, number one, to demonstrate, but also to implement. I'm loving this conversation. Allow me to probably take us to the next question. And I will now throw this to Cindy, because in this new age, yeah, of AI, everybody knows AI. My mind has been blown away in the morning when I was interacting with ChatGPT and one of the AIs. And it's quite an interesting conversation. But in this new age, Cindy, of AI, what are some of the key considerations companies endeavoring on this path should consider when it comes to privacy by design? Because AI is an actual platform whereby you give a lot of information, you give a lot of data to it. Yeah? What do you consider? Some of the organization, probably in the fintech, some of the guys who are looking towards this angle, how do you consider when it comes to privacy by design when you're talking about AI? So just dive a little bit into it, a little bit into AI, and tell us about the topic around that.
Okay, that's a good question. We agree. We are no strangers to AI. In fact, it's like every time we wake up, it's a new invention pertaining to AI. For example, ChatGPT. No sooner was it introduced than now we are already having a more advanced model in the name of ChatGPT-4, which is quite advanced. And because of the pace at which we are developing, even on a global level, it's very, very important for us to go back and see how does this affect our data, because at the core of any AI model, we have data attached. And this includes personal data as well, in order for a good model to actually be generated, because an AI model is only as good as the quality of the data that is collected. So this is that's actually a very good place to start when it comes to privacy. And something I would like to mention is something else that ties in with AI is automated decision making. So even within the law, within the GDPR itself, individuals have a right to object to processing of their data for automated decision making. And also in a further step, as Musa had mentioned about the importance of conducting data protection impact assessments, one of the criteria for when you should actually conduct a data protection impact assessment is if you are undertaking any automated decision making within your systems, within your process. So this also ties in with AI, because institutions are also utilizing AI to maybe increase functionality, increase an output, and these are some of the things that have to be considered as well. And some of the ways that data is collected through AI could be through social media posts, through customer surveys, even just through websites in general. So it's quite, it's far-reaching when it comes to the data collection element. And in the examples I have mentioned, you can see how personal data would chime in to this. So it's any organization that is worth its salt and is looking towards integrating AI to its processes, they need to be cognizant of some things. So if maybe you're employing the use of any engineers when it comes to its development, you have to make sure that your engineers also understand the importance of privacy, how privacy by design fits in. Basically, you have to create good awareness and training around what the implications of not adhering to privacy requirements is, what the requirements are from a controller's perspective, and even from a processor's perspective, because at that point, you also may be engaging these engineers as service providers. So you have to make sure that they are aware on why it's important and the value that it adds as we are also engaging with the AI. And also, it's important to make sure that you have control when it comes to who has access to data that you're processing. Because as I had mentioned, data collection is it's a key element of any AI model. So if we are collating all this data from various streams, so how are we making sure we have access control measures to make sure that not just any Tom, Dick, and Harry can have access to this data? How are we, and even are we tightening our collection efforts in such a way that we are making it almost impossible to have a breach when it comes to accessing the data that we are also collating in the steps that we are moving towards in integrating with AI. Then also, we'll keep mentioning data minimization as we go along, because even Musa made reference to it. Data minimization is very, very pivotal when it comes even to engaging with AI, because the more data you're collecting, the more likely you are to go against this particular principle and take into consideration data that you actually do not even need in your processing, or even as you're going into this AI endeavor. So it's very, very important to make sure that data is minimized, it's only linked to who it needs to, that we are also employing the use of techniques such as de-identification, so that even if we are collecting all this data, we are reducing it to a point that it cannot even be used to identify the subject to which the data pertains. So here we are also employing the use of pseudonymization. An example of such a technique would be encryption. If we're engaging also in masking, we are undertaking in tokenization to make sure that even with the vast data that we are collecting, even if we go overboard, we have an additional barrier of protection where we are using such techniques of pseudonymization. There's also the element of anonymization, where we generalize the data and it cannot be tied to any specific data subject that you're obtaining this data from. Also, it should be very tied to this. We should just avoid even the use of any quasi-identifiers. So a quasi-identifier is information on gender, information on postal code, profession, languages spoken. As Migu had mentioned, sometimes even because you're enthusiastic about getting the job, you start listing all the languages that you speak, and it's not even necessary. So we are as an organization that wants to go into the realm of AI, we have to make sure that we are not employing the use of quasi-identifiers, because these can actually be used to re-identify data subjects, as was the case, as was experienced with Netflix. They did use some quasi-identifiers, and it enabled in the instance of breach for the data subjects to actually be re-identified by the hackers. So these are some of the things that we also have to consider as we are moving towards AI. And then also, it's very important to make sure that even though you are using an AI, or you're considering going into that space, that you're making sure that because of the element of automated decision making that is involved in these models, that we are making sure that the logic behind any decisions coming out of this, that they can be explained. We have a way we can break down the logic. Even if it's an algorithm, we can break down why. That we are also incorporating even avenues for human intervention where necessary, so that the data subject doesn't feel like they're not able to enforce their rights. They don't understand what's going on. These things are just happening. So that is also some of the things one of the things we also have to take cognizance of as we are moving towards this area of AI. So at the core of AI, we have to have technical and organizational measures still, and we still have to be cognizant of the data subject, even towards this move.
Wow, wow, Cindy, thank you. I think it's quite a conversation, yeah? Because I think AI, probably AI is not even what we know as ChatGPT. Look at an example of whereby I don't know whether we should sue these companies. When I Google for a shoe on Google, or I search for a shoe on Facebook, the next time I come to Facebook, the first advertisement I see is for that shoe or for that particular thing. How, like, there has to be a machine learning behind it that identified that I searched for this particular model of car. And now when I'm going back, I start seeing ads or advertisements on cars that are being sold. Yeah. So it's quite a conversation in between. I don't know whether we should be suing these companies for it, Cindy.
Maybe you do have a case.
Yeah, okay. Because I think, but I think we somewhere we signed or we clicked, we agreed to the terms, probably without reading, yeah? All right.
That could have happened, yeah, that's true.
Guys, I think it's quite a conversation, and what Cindy is saying that even if we collect this data, when we make the decision based on this data we collected, can we explain the logic behind that? So allow me to jump into the other question, and this one I will throw it to Mr. Musa. The other question being, how should an organization go about now embedding privacy by design and privacy by design as a culture? Because like at Sentinel Africa, what we do, we help you embed some of these impacts or some of these solutions we bring to you. When you do a data privacy impact analysis, we help you. Now, the solutions we give, we want you to embed that. But Musa, how would or should an organization go about now ensuring this privacy by design actually sticks as a culture, that we understand it, the whole of us, and now this is the culture we move with? Over to you, Musa.
I wanted to just chime in a bit on the story of AI. And I think something that Cindy mentioned, which is around automated decision making, is really important, because one of the benefits that you get from intelligent systems is you reduce the effort on human decisions. So, I mean, what we're trying to see is in the future a situation where machines can make all the decisions, at the same level, as a human being can, right? So that's where we're going to. And so therefore, if that's what we want, then that means that the machines have to, be relied upon. So that, and then reduce the burden of decision making as much as possible. So then, therefore, that becomes very important why the decision was made by the machine. So if the machine was given my PII, right? So based on my age, for example, which is PII, then I was given a certain credit limit, right, by my credit card company. So if that is the information was not given to the machine, then therefore probably I would have been given a different credit limit, right? However, when you think about the process as it were, some of these decisions are actually based on that. Some of these decisions are actually based on the fact that you must provide us with your PII in order for us to actually profile you. So those decisions that depend on profiling depend on you. So, KYC, think about KYC, any form of KYC is a profile. So when we profile, we're basically collecting your PII, and then based on your PII, we are making a decision. So that in and of itself is not a bad thing, because if we did that, then insurance would not exist. Adverse selection would happen, we'd have a problem even deciding who to give medical insurance and who not to give medical insurance. So the idea is not that we have to remove that fully. The idea is that people have to know that this is why we are doing this. So when this information is being collected for me, I need to know that at the end of the day, there is a decision making that is supposed to be made. So there's a profile, and based on that profile, then I'll be given a certain level of service. And I like what Miguel said when you say that you must have read some terms and conditions somewhere, after which you gave consent to giving away all this information, but you might not have been aware of that. So those are some of the things that we just need to remember, that we need to be aware, and then we can make also our data subjects who interact with more aware about what we're doing with their information. So that at the end of the day, it's about consent and choice. So the choice, I make a choice, so I give you consent, but it is me with my data who actually give you that consent, right? So those are some of the things that we need to just consider. But otherwise, I think the world of AI is with us, and it's going to be even more important for decision making, because it alleviates a lot of unnecessary repetition from human beings, and leaves those exceptional decisions that need to be made by human beings to be made by human beings, right? So those kind of things. But others, very interesting, and I'm very excited to see what we have in store for us in the future. So looking at culture, so culture is always an interesting thing. I remember having a conversation with a good friend of mine who was in cybersecurity for the longest, and he basically just asked me this question. He said, when you're doing cybersecurity awareness, okay, what we usually do when we do cybersecurity awareness is we are telling people that, don't share your password. If you share your password, right, it can be compromised, right? Don't write your password, post-it and then leave it there. Somebody can find it, right? But people still do it. Yeah, they know, but they still do it. So what he was basically arguing is that the awareness, that's telling people, not do this, don't do this, is not the way to go, because they already know. So you're telling people the things that they know, but they don't do it. So what is it about human beings that makes us become this way? That we actually know what we're not supposed to do. We know what we should do. We know what is good for us, but then again, we don't do it. And so we have to spend, I think the industry of awareness, if I would have to check, maybe I'd ask ChatGPT, somebody can ask ChatGPT quickly there, how many $1 billion industry that whole information security awareness things, yeah? Because we spend so much money pushing training to people who 90% of them know exactly what they should be doing, yet they don't do it, right? So the issue of culture, and culture is formed by people, and the building block of culture is behavior, right? So if we participate in a certain behavior constantly by majority of the people, then we form a culture, right? And where this behavior comes from is what is wrong and what is right. So it starts from there. So do we have values? And values are basically what is wrong and what is right. So in an organization, when you are determining that you want to set up a culture, it starts by saying, what are your values? What is wrong? What should we not do? What is right? What should we do? And then because of that, then that becomes like, the 10 commandments, yeah, that Moses came from Sinai. And it gives us then the direction. So these are the values. These are the things that we should do. These are the things we should not. Then from there, we can now start to do behavior. And behavior starts from the top. So that can be the first way to answer this question. You start from the top, because the culture is formed by the top, from the top. So who is in management? Yeah, who is in the board, for example? Do we have a different way in which they evaluate privacy? When we look at privacy, for example, and I alluded to this when I first talked, and I say that you're seeing that you have usability on this other side, and you have privacy pooling on the other side. So it can look like a nuisance, because if we are developing a product right now, I mean, all of us, you should be aware that Facebook actually sued Apple the first time Apple, set up that control that actually notifies users, of Apple devices, that an app is going to track them. So it actually enforces it, asks you to allow. Facebook took them to court, and they took them to court. Why? Because they were saying that by them enforcing this, it is actually making it more difficult for users to actually give them more data for advertising dollars, right? So of course it was hitting their bottom line directly, so they took them to court. But you can see then, if this is the attitude that your senior management have, if this is the attitude that your board has, that you have, I know, not disclosing a lot, but Cindy and I have been in panels where facing, would-be clients who are basically asking us, I mean, I want to use this data. So how can I use this data? I want to use it. I have it. I know I didn't tell the users who gave it to me that this was the purpose I wanted, but I have another purpose. I see now this, I can get some more dollars with it, so I want to. So how can I do it? But you see, then that is a behavior that is that's telling you some signal from senior management that this is something that we condone in this organization, and so you're signaling to the rest. And so when it comes down from senior management as a signal, right, that do what I do, not do what I say, right? So do what I do. So then the rest of the organization is then going to follow. Then now, when we talk about the rest of the organization, now we can now start talking about the awareness that we do. We can now start talking about at the very, very least or worst, when we talk about enforcement, because with human beings, you're either enforcing through a reward or punishment, right? And then depending on your culture or depending on your organization culture, one of those things is going to work more than the other, right? So you're either going to be doing a lot more rewarding good behavior, or you're going to be punishing bad behavior, right? So, but those are the things that you do to set up, and then not just set up, but also maintain culture. It is a very long process. It requires consistency by the senior managers to actually do what they do what they say, right? That is the most important thing. And that people can see, and then they can actually adopt it. So when you talk about privacy by design, as I say, it is difficult to set up. Let me not joke. I mean, it's difficult. Let me tell you that, because it is a change. Especially if it's not something that you are doing, it is a change, and change is difficult. So therefore, it requires to be enforced, and it requires that commitment from top management. And then as we now start to see the resistance to change, that needs to be dealt with. Okay, so it's a full organizational change management, in my opinion, that you need to go through. Now, what you could do again, which is something that we do also in OCM, organizational change management, is you could scope it, so that instead of doing one thing that goes through the entire organization, you could scope and then start to prioritize. So when you do your a gap assessment, or if you do a data protection impact assessment, it will give you a sort of like an indication of what is priority. So if we figured out that, for example, in our organization, the recruitment process is the most key process that we have, where we collect a lot of PII, right? For example, if it's a hospital, for example, there's another process that they would be thinking about. For example, if it's a bank, maybe you're thinking about the onboarding process for new clients, or clients opening accounts. So that account opening process maybe is the one you think is more critical. You could actually scope it that way, so that you start on something, and then you can actually be able to measure how effective it has been before spreading this out to the rest of the organization. Especially this would work very well where you have business units. Like, for example, if you had HR, in my earlier example, I was using HR. So if you have HR, for example, and you say that we're going to focus this on HR and make sure that this thing is implemented and embedded in HR, and therefore can test it. Therefore, it's a small change. Therefore, it's easy for people to accept it, rather than doing something big bang. That could be a way to look at it, right? So I think those are the things that I can say could be some of the things that you can do for yourself, even as you're trying to implement a cultural change and make sure that this becomes a way of life in the organization. Yeah. But otherwise, again, the other thing I could say is when you have ISO standards, ISO standards help you to build what you call a management system. Okay. Now, management system by design, yeah, goes through 4 phases. The first phase of any management system is a planning phase. In the planning phase, what you're doing, you're trying, first of all, to understand the context of the organization. That is really to understand what does this organization do, what makes it unique, what is your risk landscape, both external and internal, right? Then you try to understand what is your capacity inside to be able to either attain or not attain that that management system, right? The framework. Then you go into ensuring you have leadership support and commitment. You go into designing the policies, you go into designing the objectives, and then even you do the risks and opportunities, you try to understand them. Now, what you're doing in this case is you're trying to build a framework by making sure that you have, first of all, understood what was unique about that organization so that the framework you build is actually built for purpose and it is tailor-made for that organization. Then after you go there, then you start to do the operational work. Every management system has operational work. That's some activities that you do continuously to make sure that you are identifying risks, to make sure that you are identifying ways of treating those risks, to make sure that you are continuously identifying controls and actually implementing the controls that are going to mitigate those risks which you've identified. So those are things you continuously do on a continuous process. Then you have to come and say that, okay, fine. So I have now done the operations. Then how well am I doing this? How well am I doing? So if you reach that stage, what you do an internal audit, for example, or you have set up a performance evaluation methodology or a framework for performance evaluation. Then you pick these performance metrics, and then you're able to monitor, and you're able to even do analysis and evaluation and tell, I could tweak this here, I could tweak this there, I could drop this there, I could improve this here, so that you're able to actually see that your management system is continuously effective. You do an internal audit to see whether you're complying to the requirements of the standard, complying to the requirements of the of your internal policies and procedures. Then you make sure that management is also involved in the identification of areas of improvement, right? And then finally, after you've done that, you actually implement those improvements that you've identified. So that gives you a very very detailed, or what I would say, a specific, step-by-step way of implementing this cultural change. So you don't have to guess. You can actually go to an ISO standard, and that can help you to do this. Now, when you're talking about privacy, the de facto ISO standard for privacy is ISO 27701, which came out in 2019, and it is an extension of your 27001, which is the information security management system. So currently it's undergoing review. So we expect by 2023 or latest early 2024, we expect to see a later version of the ISO 27701. However, it is a very good standard to implement. It enables you to set up a privacy framework. So when we talk about privacy by design, that is going to be implemented. Then we talk about the controls that need to be implemented. Those are going to be implemented. We talk about competence, training, all the components that you require to set up this culture will be implemented in your management system. Then after that, it is a certifiable standard. So you're able to actually go to a certification body, and then they can come and audit your organization. And then you can actually have your organization certified for what you call a privacy information management system, which is ISO 27701. So those are some of the things that I could say would easily help you as an organization to actually pick up and know that, yes, I'm going in the right direction. What I'll achieve at the end of this will actually be privacy by design as a culture in my
organization. If I can just maybe add a bit also from Musa's elaborate explanation of how to embed culture, just to basically, it's how you make it personal to the employees. You make it such that it becomes even their second nature. And just as an attestation to the additions that he's mentioned about now going the ISO certification route when it comes to ISMS and also privacy, an example of we having been certified ourselves as a Sentinel, I can just honestly say, like, from practical examples, how we operate with as information security and privacy as a default. So if I could give an example where we were to onboard a corporate cab service, and then an email was shared out by the specific service provider, and because people had not caught wind, by default, people reported the email as a phish, because for us, the default is to not go that route. So those are some of the things, the behavioral changes you start seeing when it is embedded even through a certification standard. So I just wanted to add a bit of my 2 cents when it comes to embedding it as a culture.
Wow, quite important, quite well detailed, Musa. So it's a the culture will begin by what is wrong and what is right. Like, if you don't get that correctly, then even from the top down, it's going to be really tricky for you to implement. And quite interesting to also hear that you don't have to guess on these things. You don't have to start thinking on where do I start. They are just like the way Musa is saying, they are ISO standards that are existing. The company can actually be certified against that standard. Yeah. And how do you go that journey? That journey, you can even engage an advisor such as Sentinel for them to take you through that journey, for them to be able to give you a gap assessment, for you to know what is the position are you carrying. So I'm quite blown away. I'm quite blown away by this conversation, and I'm really glad we started it. And I think it's quite a conversation that would go more and more. And I would have a million questions to ask you guys for the sake of my audience. But because of a little bit of time that might be not on our side, allow me to probably hold the questions at that. But I wouldn't want to end this conversation without having some few questions from the audience. Yeah, like I know we've been given a lot. Yeah.
Sorry, everybody. I think we seem to be having a challenge with the guys back in Nairobi. So just give us a minute. We'll just get them back on. I've been told Nairobi is raining, so I don't know if it's rained until Migwi has disappeared. I've been told Nairobi is raining, so I don't know if you had to go somewhere. You're on mute, maybe.
I don't know who raised their hands and chased me away. So guys, just raise up your hand so that we can probably pick 2 or 3 of you. I can't see any hand raised, but there are 2 questions that are already asked. So as you raise up your hand, as you go to reactions down there on Zoom, just go to reactions and then just raise up your hand. But Cindy and Musa, before probably we get those questions, we already had 2 questions that we had received. Trying to read them from chat. Yeah, so Cindy, can you probably read the question from chat? Read a question
sure.
from.
Sure, maybe. Okay, so the first question was from Nicholas. He asked if it means that organization processes, procedures, and policies have to embed data protection aspects as well.
No, so not in all the processes, yeah?
Mhm.
Okay.
Yes, if it's important. So his question is if it is important to embed privacy within our processes and procedures and policies. And the short answer would be yes, Nicholas. If I could take the question, Migwi.
Yeah, you can take the question.
Okay, so the short answer would be yes, because within basically when it comes to our processing activities, mostly around our processes that cover processing activities that entail data, even procedures that cover that, and also policies. And the reason why we say it should ideally be within all our processes and procedures is because some of them play a supporting role. And if we remove privacy from some and then maybe pick and choose, it might be a bit difficult to embed the privacy as a default. So an example of this would be within the HR manual. For example, if our disciplinary process does not include discipline around a breach of confidentiality, breach of privacy, then if someone works in contravention to our data privacy policy, then we would not have an ability to sanction them. So at least when we are having our processes and procedures, we should have privacy aspects covered so that we can make sure that they are operating in a streamlined manner.
Quite great. Thank you, Cindy, for that. Yeah. So you need to identify, as you're saying. I don't know whether Musa, you have an addition to that.
No, maybe I think Cindy has covered it quite well,
right.
right? So maybe just to help Nicholas is, again, as I mentioned, yeah, you don't have to start from nowhere. Yeah. So when you have a framework, for example, like an ISO standard, that's why I really advocate for ISO standards, because ISO standards take the requirements from the law and then they give you now a step-by-step process by which to do this. So if you are looking at this from an ISO perspective, you would actually have the first step, which is to be to understand your context of your organization. And then as you're understanding the context of organization, you now have a good idea about what is critical to you, which you need to prioritize, and what is not critical, which you will not prioritize as the first things you do. Remember, the issue here is about materiality and scarcity of resources. So you cannot do everything at once. So how do you decide what to start and what to, put for later, what to plan? So the decision will be made through that process where we do understanding of your context. The ISO standard gives you a very good step-by-step approach by which to do that. However, as Cindy has said, once you have determined that these things are important to you, then you must then go ahead and do that, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Musa. Thank you. So I'm going to take 2 questions. I see we have one from Doreen Sembe. So Yuvi, I would request you unmute Doreen. Doreen Sembe, you can just introduce yourself, tell us where you're joining us from and your organization, and then you can ask the question.
Thank you so much, Megwe. This webinar has been very, very informative. I'm happy that we have Cindy on the other side who has taken us through so well. I'm an advocate of the High Court of Kenya. I work with Merit at Law Africa. The question that I had, I think it has just been answered, the last bit of the question that Cindy and, sorry, I've forgotten the other gentleman's name.
Yeah.
Musa. Yes, Musa and Cindy have actually already answered my question. I was to ask now, as a law firm, because I'm speaking from where I work, how do you go about determining or deciding which framework or a privacy principle will you have your organization registered under? And I've got it very clearly. It's you determine what you want, what comes first, and what exactly drives you to want to comply with the privacy principles. So I've got that right. And I've also got clearly that ISO principles are embedded in law. So I think I'm clear on that. I've even put down my hand, but so far I am very grateful.
Thank you, Doreen. Thank you, Doreen, for that.
Doreen.
But I don't, Doreen, we are grateful that yeah, you've at least I've seen you know Cindy. And Cindy, thank you for taking these people through these implementations out there. So I don't know, Yuvi, do we have someone else who has a question? Just raise up your hand so that you can unmute you. We're going to give 2 chances, and then we close it at that. So Yuvi, do we have anyone else who's raised their hand, probably not have seen? Or anyone who want to ask a question or a contribution, just raise up your hand, and then we give you a chance. We always say, being a panel discussion, it's important to have a little bit of engagement from the audience. Yuvi, anyone else, or should we just proceed?
I think we can proceed to the questions that are asked on the chat. Currently, there are no hands raised.
Okay, which do you have any question that you might have missed on chat kindly?
So there's one question here. Which are some of the firms that audit other organizations for ISO 27701?
Yeah, which are some of the firms that audit organization against ISO 27701? Yeah, got that right? Good. So I will throw
Yes.
that question to Musa. Musa, you got that?
Yeah. So that's quite okay. So when you look at ISO certification, all organizations are audited by what we call certification bodies, right? So every ISO certificate will be awarded by a certification body. In fact, even it belongs to certification body. Even they'll have their logo on it. They'll have that. So that is what you will see. Now, certification bodies are also accredited by accreditation authorities. So there's that hierarchy of accreditation. So by the time you're being certified as an organization, the organization that's certifying you has also been accredited by another organization for them to actually be able to do that activity of certification. So when you talk about certification bodies, quite a number. You could, quite a number, especially 27701. Yeah, when you look at the ones that are there in the market, there's a British Standard Institute, which is very well known. TUV, there is MSCCB. So there are quite a number. I think if you reach out and leave us your contact, or anyone else who's interested, we can be able to share with you a list of these organizations that you can basically interact. However, as we alluded to, it is usually a process of implementation first before then you go for certification. So that when you're going for certification, you actually know that you have privacy. So 27701 is called PIMS, yeah? PIMS, that is PIMS, which stands for Privacy Information Management System. So you need to have a privacy information management system in place before you can go for certification. So there's some work that is involved in the implementation. So before you can actually say that you're ready for certification, right? So whoever you involve as a consultancy firm will then be able to help you through that journey all the way towards engaging the certification body and even conducting the certification audit and getting that certification. Yeah.
Thank you, Musa. So you said there is implementation first, because you can't audit a system that is not in existence. Yeah. So there is implementation first, then there is audit, then there is certification that comes at the end. Yeah. So at implementation, Sentinel Africa can actually take you through implementation through the whole journey until we help you even to get ready for certification, to get ready for the audit, and even help you get towards a certification. So that's quite important. Thank you, Musa. I hope that question is well answered. Good. So if do we have any other question, Yuvi?
Yes, we have one more question. We have a question by Nicholas, and he is asking, does this mean that all the organization processes, procedures, and policies have to embed data protection aspects?
Oh, I think we had taken that one, yeah? I think we had taken that question earlier as the beginning, yeah? That's okay, Yuvi, thank you. So if there is no one else with a question, I would want to close it at that. So guys, Let me hope we've not closed out anyone on anyone with any question. Let me see. Just kindly ask the question so that we don't close you out. We're just giving you 2 minutes. If you have a question, just ask. Yeah, there's someone who is asking, apart from the ISO standard, is there any other framework in data privacy? Musa or Cindy? There's someone who is asking, apart from the ISO standard, is there any other framework that we follow through? Let me throw it to Musa.
Okay, so not necessarily frameworks. We have regulations. Yeah, so like for example, in Kenya, we now have regulations. Yeah, that support the implementation of the requirements of the Act, the Kenya Data Protection Act. When you look at the EU GDPR, those are the regulations, right? That come out. So you have not necessarily a framework, but you have those regulations. The other thing you have is you have curriculum for certification of personnel. So we have curriculum for CDPC, which is the ISACA curriculum. And so that actually takes you through some form of framework that you could then follow towards implementation. You also have a framework for CIPP, again, which is a certification for it's at a personnel level. Then those are some of the things that you could actually use. However, ISO is the best known framework. We have quite a number of ISO standards. So it's not just a 27701. 27701 is what is certifiable, gives you a management system. However, you have principles of privacy like ISO 29100. Cindy talked about the principles of privacy by design, ISO 31700, right? Then you have a whole slew of ISO, especially in the 27 family, where they talk about things that are more specific to data controllers and data processors and things like those. So you have quite a number of policy frameworks under ISO that you could use when you're doing implementation.
Thank you.
And if I could just add a bit to what Musa has said. Also over and above this, we also obtain. We have the GDPR, which I think I had mentioned in brief. That's the General Data Protection Regulations that apply to the EU or any processor or controller that processes data pertaining to EU citizens. And now within the GDPR, you also have working papers that emanate from the supervisory authority. And these are, for example, we have working paper 29, which is also referred to as WP 29, which also provides guidance on the role of a DPO, for example, and also how you should undertake a data protection impact assessment and things of that nature. So also at a global level, we also have that framework to rely on as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Cindy. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's been a great webinar. And I believe that you guys have tapped quite the knowledge and what is required from our panelists, and we are lucky to have had a little bit of time with them, and you can always keep engaging with them. But before I let them go, or I let us all go, I would like to probably ask a closing remark from Cindy, and then a closing remark from Musa, just probably a few minutes, like 3 of each, that you can also close it up for us. So we start with Cindy.
Thank you, Mary. So first of all, I would just like to thank you very much for making time for attending this webinar. It's very, very important in our pursuit of knowledge because these are things that the world is changing. We're getting more regulation, more laws, and approaches to now implementing might be vast. So we need to understand where to begin. So the first step is trying to educate yourself, which is a very, very good show. And even the engagement we've undertaken, the questions you have asked shows that interest. So I would just want to thank you for making time. And in your pursuit to also gain further knowledge, there are trainings available from our end we also do offer further training if you want to understand this concept in more in-depth. Even if you want to get certification on the same as an individual, we do offer that as well. So feel free to reach out, and we could also provide now information on how you can undertake that. But all in all, thank you for engaging with us, and I wish you all the best in your privacy implementation journey. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. Musa?
Okay, for me, again, similar to Cindy, to thank everybody for making time. This was actually very, very interesting, a lot of fun. Always nice to talk about topics that have been brought to us. Data protection, especially in the region where we are in, is something new, right? Not as even in terms of the structures, when you're talking about the framework to actually implement or enforce this from a government point of view, not as what I'd say complete, right, as what you have in the EU, for example, the EU GDPR, which has been there since 2018. We see a lot of work going through the supervisory authorities of the EU, and we really are seeing that there is a very good, at least a push from even the local governments towards getting us to that point. So therefore, it is something that we need to think about. It is something that requires professionals. It is an area where we require competence, right? Organizations are looking for people who can then help, to guide. So it's not just about, this is just something that I'd like to put out there. You're not just the person who knows how to point out the problems, right? You also need to be the person who can actually provide the solutions. And so when we have these discussions and have these webinars, I'd encourage you to show up. Let's talk. Let's have this engagement more and more. We help each other as we are, moving towards this. Because as I said, when I started, it's about all of us. When all of us see that it is important for all of us, then the actual objective of that law, will actually be achieved. Okay. Otherwise, for me again, just to say that it is not a very complicated topic. It is not. It's not just reserved for lawyers or reserved for IT practitioners. It is something that affects us because we are actually the subjects. We share our personal information as we try to get service. So it is something that every one of us will actually be able to contribute in terms of even just asking questions and trying to understand what are these things that are happening to us, right? So again, I'm happy and I'm encouraged when I see such participation. And I would like to make sure that after this, if there's anything that you want to find out, you can always reach out to us. Reach out to me, my LinkedIn. Step my name. I think I'm the only Musa Suta on LinkedIn. So let's reach out, let's connect, let's have conversations, and I wish you all the best in the implementation journey as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy and Musa, for that. I think to narrow it down is that this conversation can actually continue. One can actually be certified, can get a certification, a CDPO certificate, attend a class, a 5-day class, and you're a certified data protection officer. And just like the way Musa is saying, you don't have to be a lawyer, you don't have to be an IT guy. You can actually, wherever in your organization, if you're in compliance, you're in IT, if this conversation is really important for you to be able to go back to your organization and help it move to the next step, help it go into ISO standards. You can even start with getting that certification, attending the training. We usually have public trainings during the year. We even have a training, an upcoming training on 27th this month. You can actually join that training, 5 days, and you have your certificate. You're a certified data protection officer. More to that, we even advance the conversation as an advisor of choice. We even help you start the actual implementation, help you with the implementation, help you with even preparing for an audit, and even push you through to even certification as an organization. You will have an ISO certification, ISO 27701 certification as an organization. So thank you so much, guys, for that. And as Musa is saying, it's important for us to connect. So you can look out for Musa on LinkedIn. His name is Musa Wesutsa. And also look out for Cindy on LinkedIn. Just go to LinkedIn and connect. And also I'd request you to just probably share our LinkedIn. It's been shared on chat. Just open chat. Click the link to our LinkedIn. Follow Sentinel Africa. You can also find me on LinkedIn. as Ian P. Megwe or Ian Boniface Megwe. And then we can connect from there and start the conversation going. And you can also view our trainings. You can view our website, see more about what we do and what we advance on. Otherwise, from this training, from this webinar, you are going to get number one, you're going to get the recording for this. Also the PowerPoint we've been presenting. We'll gather the answers that Musa and Cindy has given us. There's someone who was putting them down. So we are going to put those particular answers into this PPT, then share it as PDF to all of you. So the email you registered, we're going to share it. So if the email was probably you want it shared to a different email, you can just send your name here on chat and also send the email address that you want it sent to. So other than that, we'll also share the link to the video that is going to be on our YouTube channel. So you can also go there and watch. So guys, ladies and gentlemen, I am grateful to you all.